Hi, Lee Harris. Welcome to Livsenergi channel.
Thank you so much for having me, Alexandra. I'm excited.
I am excited too. And you know, here we are in spring, Stockholm, in the afternoon, late afternoon, and you just woke up.
Yeah, it's my 8 a.m. in California, so I've only been up for about 90 minutes, yeah.
And you had a drive in that time as well.
Yes.
That's a good thing, yeah.
So I like the world being quiet in the morning. It's kind of, I don't know, there's something magical about the quietness of the world, whether it's the end of the day or I think especially when the sun is rising and nobody is really awake yet. It's lovely.
I love that moment too. It's the best time of day. So Lee, we are happy to have you here because we are about to launch your book, Energy Speaks. In Sweden, we have translated that title to something that could be the spiritual compass. How does that
makes sense? I like that. That's lovely.
Yeah, good. I'm glad. You better like it.
Otherwise, I'm in trouble.
It's actually going to print in a couple of days, so we still have time for edits.
Well, and it's funny, it makes sense because Energy Speaks was very much the way I viewed it was a kind of greatest hits of all of the topics that my guides had taught over about a 12-year period at the time. So spiritual compass makes sense because I feel that rather than focusing on just relationships or your relationship to abundance, it's kind of a little bit of everything. So I think it's a really good opening book to spirituality, especially if channeling is something that's new to you. I feel like it gives a broad overview and kind of invites you into some really important key topics for all of us as human beings living a spiritual life.
We'll come back to those topics later because I'd like to discuss or actually hear your and maybe the guide's view of why you chose the topics that you chose. But let's talk a little bit about you first. So we can hear you have an accent. You're not from California from the beginning.
No. I moved to Colorado 9 years ago and I've been in California now for 6 years. But I'm originally from England, where I was born. I was born in Birmingham, in the kind of center part of England. But when I was 6, we moved to Windsor. And that's where I grew up for my childhood. And then I lived in Manchester, London, Brighton, before I came here.
Oh, you have moved around quite a bit.
Yeah. I only had a year in Amsterdam, almost a year in Amsterdam, which was great.
So what made you choose California?
It was interesting. I had this experience when I was 21. I was at university in Manchester and I was stopped by a psychic in like a Costco supermarket. I'd never been to a Costco before and a friend took me. And she said to me, "You're going to live in America." She said, "You can't stay here. It will be too small for you." She said, "But you're going to America. It's where you're supposed to be, and it's where you and your work will expand." And this was before I had even, it was 2 years later that I heard the voice of my guide. So it was a bit of a strange, surprising experience that this woman suddenly just started giving me this message. But I remembered it. I remembered it a few times over the decade. And when I moved here, I remembered it very clearly. And I thought, how interesting that she was accurate, but at the time I couldn't see what steps would lead me here. And the steps were, I fell in love with the place. For me, one of the things that remains about America that coming from England is an extraordinary thing for me is the landscape. I used to love Scotland and, parts of England, beautiful parts of Yorkshire. And I used to always love the countryside in England. But here it's on another scale. It's pretty incredible. And the fact that there are so many varied landscapes here next to each other on one landmass, coming from a small island, that to me was just fascinating. But also work. My work was very popular here. Even back in 2006, when I put my very first things online, Americans would be at least 50% of the audience. So I found myself coming here for seminars about 4 times a year. And every time I came here, I was always sad to leave. Mm-hmm. And I really had to notice that. And after several years, I was like, wow, I feel alive when I go there. And I feel more expanded when I go there. So could I try and make this work? And I reminded myself, I can always come back. But if I don't go, I'll never know. So even though when I finally left, there was that, you know, that part of you that's like, oh, my family, my friends, I'm going to miss everybody. But I just thought, let's just go for a few years and see what happens. So I got a visa because of my work. And the rest is history. And now I'm married and I live in California. And yeah, now it really feels like this is where I live, but it took many years.
Yeah, well, still, we have to explore life, even though we might have to move geographically from our families and friends.
Yeah, definitely.
My family is spread all over the world with a lot of siblings in Australia, in London, in France, etc. Nice,
that's good. That makes going on trips easy, I guess.
That's how me and my mom sees it. It's a good reason to do some traveling. Exactly. Once COVID is out of the way.
Exactly, yeah.
Good. So let's talk a little bit about you. You have said a few things about work and what you're doing, but what are you really doing? And how did you end up where you are right now?
Well, you know, for me, I remember, so I heard the voice of my guides when I was 22, 23 years old. And at the time, you know, the first thing you think when that happens is that you're hearing voices. You know, I was like, oh, wow, is this schizophrenia, which is what we called it back then. I believe now the term is multiple personality disorder. But my argument to that question I posed to myself was, well, if it is, they're really useful. I was like, I got a really good voice because this is helping me sort my life out. This is really good. So, you know, I soon realized that what had happened to me, and this isn't uncommon, I was taken to see a channeler by a friend. I was very interested in healing. I needed to heal. You know, I had bulimia and eating disorders in my childhood. I was heavily overweight. I was like many sensitives. I was too emotional for my life, and I didn't know how to sort those emotions out. So I was either stuffing them down and quashing them, or they were coming out of me in ways that were chaotic. And this was all very subtle. I don't think that the people around me necessarily would have experienced me in that way, in a big way. But for me, that was how I felt. I felt very alien inside myself. And so healing, as I started to walk towards healing, everything started to open up for me. And I was very interested in metaphysics, but I was not interested in channeling. I don't know what I thought of it. I think I probably was skeptical and a little suspicious. And when I saw this man, I saw this man, and he was this lovely man. And my friend took me to visit him, and he channeled a guide called Hazim. And he wasn't out in the world doing this. He had a very successful business, he and his wife. So he did this once a week for free because he didn't need to earn money from it. And basically, I was taken to see him. And I remember thinking, what a nice man. And then he sat down and he said, okay, now we're going to do the channeling. And he closed his eyes, and I started to have a conversation with Hazim. And what Hazim said to me was really, really powerful and really interesting. But I left that house, and I said to my friend in the car on the way home, I said, well, why did he have to put on like a funny voice and close his eyes? Why couldn't he just have told me that? And at the time, I didn't understand. And I think that unless you've channeled yourself, it's hard to understand that. For me now as an intuitive, I don't get the kinds of intuitive insights that my guides will give me. I could talk to you about you, and I could feel into certain aspects of your soul, certain aspects of what you're dealing with as a human being. But that overview that the guides give is very different. They're not embedded in the humanity the way that we are. So they just see things energetically from above. So when I channel, there are things that they will say that are new to me every time, and information to me. So what happened was I started to do this work for myself for many months. I would come home and write all of these questions down. And then after many years, I think it was about 4 or 5 years, I was reading for friends, and one of them said to me, you should be doing this as a job. So how I got to what I'm doing today is I began doing readings for the public. And I had an email address. It was called guidance2012@hotmail.com, because at the time we all thought we were going to die in 2012, or at least that was what some people thought. So I thought, well, 2012. And so that was what my website was called, guidance2012.com. And this was 2004. And yeah, I started doing these readings for the public. And within 2 years, I could no longer stay at my normal job. I was so busy. I was tired. I was like doing my job, and then I was coming home and doing the readings. And also it had become more financially viable. At the beginning, I was just a donation. But then after a while, when I realized each one was taking me 90 minutes and it took a certain amount of energy, I started to charge appropriate money for the readings so I could leave my job. So it really began by just helping people one-on-one and answering their questions. And then as those years went on, I started to think, well, my time is limited as to how much I can be with one person. And also, not everybody could afford £50 or $70 for a reading, or, whatever it was at the time. So what if I start putting articles out there? And what if I do a recording from them that's general and that's talking about who we are? So I started very small and very slowly in about 2005. And today I basically run my own production company, which was always a dream of mine. I thought, what if I could work with wonderful creatives who I can pay well, who I really enjoy and are like family to me? And what if we were able to create our own work in the world? Because I knew very well how limiting it was to not be able to create things if you didn't have a company. As a musician trying to get into the music industry, I self-funded my own album, but then had real trouble promoting it, getting it out there, because I couldn't get into the system. So slowly but surely I thought, wow, this could be my own system. I could create my own things and put them out. And especially as the internet was just beginning to really open up around that time, slowly but surely I got to build. So now, 17 years later, I have 15 people working with me on a weekly basis. They're not all full-time. Many of them have their own artistic thing going on as well, which is great. But yeah, it's kind of very different now, because we put videos out, we put writings out, we put online workshops, courses. And the thing that makes me happiest is my free work reaches more people than anything. But the people who do choose to buy something that we're offering, they basically fund that work, because none of my free work is actually free. I'm paying everybody to do that free work with me, and to put it out. So that's that's a very long answer. I'm sorry, but that's what I'm doing in the world now. Okay.
Want to hear. And you're actually tapping in a little bit to your previous life. What were you working with when you first of all, we have to speak a little bit about the Z guys, or how do you pronounce
it?
Yeah,
right.
Because
the
in Sweden, the Z's, yeah, we don't know what they are, who they are.
So when I first heard them on the London Underground, the subway, which is, the in a way, it kind of was very humbling and grounding for me, because in my head, to hear the voice of your guides, I thought you should have been very pure and probably a raw vegan and probably meditating for 1,000,000 hours a day. Like that's what I would have thought you needed to be, because that's where my head was at when I was 24. And what I realized was, nope, it doesn't have to be like that. If you really think about it, and this is what the Z's say, energy and spirit are around all of us all of the time. We as human beings are learning lessons. Sure, all of us have our lessons to learn. We all have our gifts. We all might have areas of ourself that we need to develop or grow or expand. But spirit's here. You know, you only have to look at I'm looking at the extraordinary trees out the window, and the spirit of those trees, if you know how to feel it or tap into it, it's very evident. So for me, what happened with the Z's was when I first heard their voice, I was like, this isn't a voice in my head. Like I knew what those voices were. They were not very kind. They were very unkind toward me, or going, oh, you haven't done this, or you can't get into the music industry, da da da. You know, all the stuff I was like struggling with and battling with. But this voice was very clear. So when I asked, I said, are you my guide? The answer I got was, I am the spokesperson for your guides, but we're actually a group, because I thought it was one guide, and they went, no, we're a group of 88. And we then extend wider into source. So source as in source energy. You might call it universal power, universal light. You might call it God, whatever that higher power means to you. And they explained, just as you are now having a conversation with us, and they didn't use this word, but what I now understand, I'm channeling, having a kind of a reaching across conversation. They said, so too are we the same. They said, we are a group of 88, but we're not fixed like you are as a human being. As a soul in a human body, you are fixed in that body. You are fixed in that life, and you can go beyond, and you can remember things from other lifetimes. You can have cosmic experiences, but you're fixed in this body until this body passes, and then you leave the body again. What they said is, we are not fixed like human beings are, but we are a group of 88 beings. Some of us have been incarnate on the earth before. Some of us haven't. They said, we have within us various kinds. So there are angelics. There are beings who identify as more galactic. They have never incarnated on the earth, but they are from other parts of the galaxy. But they said, we are not one thing. We're a group. So they said, you can think of us as a consciousness library, and we too can channel out of our group for things that we need, because everything is connected. So to me, that was interesting, because at that point, the only understanding I'd had of channeling, and it was limited, was, Jane Roberts channels Seth. And I hadn't read those books, but I'd heard of her. I hadn't at that time heard of Esther Hicks, because it was years later I heard of her. But for example, she channels Abraham. So without investigating their channeling, I thought, well, they channel one name, one being. And in a very human way, I thought, they're speaking to an angel, a guide. So I was a little bit like, okay, well, I am hearing one of you. And they were like, yeah, but there are many voices behind this voice. So as the years went on, I heard two more voices came forward. I had an experience where lots did one weekend, but there were only three that wanted to speak, that really were, if you like, capable of having the frequency of speaking. Because a couple of them that I had contact with, they weren't very, they weren't easy to understand. Their sentence construction wasn't very good. Like, it was almost as if they were struggling to get words. So that was an interesting experience. But these three identified, these three spokespeople, Zachary, Zayadora, and Zachariah. And so between the years of 2005 and about 2012, I would channel, and I would be able to identify after I channeled, that was Zachariah, that was Zayadora, because they each had slightly different energies, and they had different feelings, and they would talk about different areas of life. But then the people who followed my work started calling them the Z's. And so the reason I now call them disease is because that's what everyone else called them. And around 2013, they basically said, we're no longer going to identify as different voices because it's not helpful. They said, you're coming into a period on Earth where unity is really important and oneness is really important. They said, so therefore, we will again just go back to one voice and call us the Z's. So I was like, okay. But I still have a relationship with Zachary. Like if I'm speaking to them myself, it's Zachary who I really hear at the front. But it's interesting. I've also noticed how over the last 20 years they've changed, just as I've changed, the world has changed. So they bring through different things now because I guess we're all in a different place.
Yeah, that's very true. But how, so I assume that meeting, the first meeting in the subway, was life-changing.
It was, but it was also weird. Like, you know, again, I'll go back to people often say to me, were you ever scared of them? And the weirdest thing is absolutely not. That was the thing. They felt like home immediately. I was more scared of what other people would think. You know, I'm not stupid. I went to school. I know what bullies in the playground are like. And I was like, oh God, I don't want to have to deal with this. So, and people, we have been trained as a Western society to be skeptical and fearful of spirit that is not organized for us through, for example, religion. I think that's changing now. But when I was, I'm 45 this month. When I was growing up, religion was really it. And spirituality was just beginning to come in a more open way. So I remember, because I am practical, I remember testing them, like asking them lots of questions, not in a very, I wasn't suspicious because I could feel it was real, but I thought, well, I should really, ask some questions that I don't know the answer to and see what they say. And so I did a couple of different things. I asked them questions about the universe at large that really opened my eyes. But I also asked them questions about people in my life. And I'll give you an example. There was someone that I was in a bit of a fight with, what's he do? I thought he was wrong. Yeah. And they were like, no, he's not wrong. This is your problem. And here's why. And I was like, oh. And then they would tell me why it was my problem. And I would see exactly why I was like, where was that coming from? And they would walk me back through past events and they would say, this is because, and it was amazing because not only did the information make sense to my mind, more importantly, my body went from, it kind of went like this, like it just opened out. So it was a vibrational effect that they were having on me. So for that first few years, I had this very private life that was very separate from everyone in my world, apart from maybe 5 people, because I couldn't, I was studying and I was learning, and it was way too weird at the time to talk to other people about. But I think when I started using it to help other people, that was when I started to get a little braver about my own discomfort, because suddenly you realize your own discomfort is small. It's a small thing compared to the fact that perhaps 100 people might be helped by you doing something. It's like, okay, well, I can try and grow. I can try and evolve. And I'm not saying I had those conscious thoughts at the time. I think it was just pulling me that way. And now I look back and I see that I was able to grow beyond my own discomfort about what people thought of me in the world, which, if you remember, I said how my childhood was. I was very overweight. I had eating disorders. I was very ashamed of myself in a few different ways when I was a kid. So to put myself on the line to be judged was actually really good growth for me. It was something that I kind of needed to do in order to have a lighter relationship with it, or the people I envied, who seemingly didn't care. They're like, oh, I don't care what they think. I was always like, oh, wow, I want to hang out with that person because I'm definitely scared of what people think. So in a way,
again, very brave, though. Brave.
Yeah, but I always say that to be brave, you have to be in the presence of fear. Nobody is brave when they are fearless. But to be brave, I think, is just being willing to fear is present, and then bravery is also present, and you can just push bravery enough forward that fear can start to transmute. Because fear always wants to, any wounded life force inside us, it doesn't want to stay in that low or tight vibration. It wants us to do something to open it out. Yeah. So, yeah.
Very true. But I've been reading your book, of course. But if we go back to when you were 23, right, and you met your guides for the first time, what kind of a spiritual background did you have? Because meeting guides, I mean, that's quite an experience. So what kind of knowledge and what kind of practice did you have before that? Any?
I was 7 years into metaphysical, and I should also say personal development studies. So for me, metaphysical studies is when you really look into the energetics of things, or things like guides, angels, spirit world. Personal development, personal growth can kind of be seen as a fusion of the understanding of energy and emotional intelligence meets psychology. So understanding the kind of patterns that we as humans are in, and using books, teachings, and tools to help you overcome those patterns, whether it's shame, guilt, fear. So understanding it very much on a human level is how I see personal growth and personal development. So I was very interested in both those things, but the one thing that happened for me that should have been an indicator, but I didn't see this until years later. I was taken to a tarot reader at the age of 16, and I loved it. I was like, wow, this is really cool. And, at the time, I guess what I remember about it was I loved getting that information and getting that kind of future look at what was possible, but also hearing about my past in a way that helped me trust it in a certain way or understand what it was doing for me. But what I now realize, because I remember very vividly, my body activated in that tarot reading. My body felt this crackle of electricity. And so I had a deck of cards when I was 19. I bought myself a deck because by that point, I'd probably been for, 20 tarot readings over that 4 years, because I would go like 5 times a year. I loved it. I bought myself a deck of cards, and I remember, I don't know what possessed me, but I had a friend come round to my house and I said, oh, should we do some tarot cards? I knew nothing about what any of the cards meant. Like, I'd never read the book. I'd never studied them. I knew a couple of cards, what they vaguely meant, but we put these cards down and we were just kind of playing. And I started to tell her things, and her face went white. Like, she was like, how did you know that? And it was some pretty heavy stuff, actually, about her childhood that she'd never told me, that I don't think I even really realized at the time was accurate, because we were just playing. But it was weird. I then had multiple experiences of that same thing. And I remember at a party offering to read someone's palm. So I don't know why I was doing these things. Again, it was just, let's play. I had a good sense of humor. I liked people I could laugh with. So we were doing it in the spirit of play. But I would take this person's hand and I would start to get information for them. And they again would go, how did you know that? Or they'd be crying. And my joke was, I'd end up at a party with someone in the corner crying because I'm giving them information. They're like, oh my God, So it was there, and they basically said to me when I met them, they said, you've been hearing us all along, but you weren't ready to fully hear us until now. Yeah. And the thing I will say to anyone listening is, if I could tell you who I was at that age as a person, I would say to you, I wasn't ready. Like, you know, I could list for you all the things I was worried about, all the things I was scared about, all the things that I wasn't doing great. But this still happened to me. So for me, that was evidence. I was like, well, if it can happen to me, and I was not a perfect person, I was not fully pure, I certainly didn't see myself as highly evolved. It helped me understand that this is for all of us. This isn't for the elite few or for the special person who's done all this meditation, which is very much what I thought at that time. Now I think we don't hold those kinds of ideas, but 20 years ago, that was very much the way spirituality was viewed. It was either feared or it was pedestaled, both of which are very dangerous, because spirituality is just a part of our life and our humanity.
I think that you're right. It's much more accessible today and acceptable. It's not so much taboo and it's not so much woohoo anymore. Thank you very much. But still, we do set up certain barriers of how to reach that kind of higher self. Meditation is one, because we are too stressed, and you know, so some things are. So it's very, how do you say? It's nice to hear that anyone can get there to, or can get guidance without being the purest version of oneself.
So one of the things that I do, and obviously we haven't done live workshops in a room for, I guess, a year and a bit now. Mm-hmm. But when I was in the room with people, and even on my online courses, one of my favorite things to do is to, with no warning, tell everybody that we're about to channel. They're about to channel for themselves. And I'll give you an example. Like the last time I did this, I think we were in New York, or we were in Canada, and there were probably 300 people in the room that day. It was a one-day workshop. So it's a good number of people to test this out on. And when I announce, okay, you're going to channel for yourself now, you'll see a group of people in the audience go, oh, good, you know, because they're channeling all the time, and they're down for it. You'll see some people in the audience kind of go, aren't I here for you to do that? Aren't I just sitting here and you're doing that? And then you see some people in the audience go, like, completely, what? Everybody is given, we usually give out a large piece of card and a pen, and we play some music, and I say, all you're going to do is, for the next few minutes, sit there and write what you hear. And you don't have to connect with a guide or an angel if that feels foreign to you. You're going to speak to the voice of your soul. Mm-hmm. So let your soul write something to you. And it's my favorite thing, because for that probably 3-4 minutes that we play the music, we start, and I just encourage people, and I go, don't think about it. You can't get this wrong. It doesn't matter if you only get 4 words. Just take the time and let's do it. And the people who looked the most horrified that I told them we were about to do this, you know, they'll look at me a little cautiously, but then everyone starts doing it. So they put their head down. And what I love is I will look at that room afterwards, and probably a good 25% of the room have gentle tears rolling down their face, because they wrote a message for themselves, from their higher self. And it's very moving. And the way I'll explain the love frequency that comes through when you do that, I did private sessions for 14 years, every week. And I had people who would come to me and mentor with me for specific things they wanted. And this one woman, wonderful woman, very funny woman, very powerful in business. She was the head of a kind of a big company that she created. So she was very business oriented, and she had this spiritual awakening. And she said, I want to channel. So I was like, okay, we'll work on that. So she comes back to me after the session where I've given her homework. Mm-hmm. And I said, between now and our next session, which is in 2 weeks, you're going to channel for yourself 7 times. I said, ideally do it every other day. Take 5 minutes, and you can set the alarm. It only has to be 5 minutes, but you're going to sit and write a message for yourself. So we come onto the screen and I said, how did it go? And she went, oh, it was all right, but I didn't really get anything. I wasn't really channeling. And I was like, okay, well, how do you know? And she went, because I'll read. So I got her to read some of it to me. And it was like, dear, you're wonderful. You're very loving. It was very affirming of who she was. And it was talking about, and she basically said to me, well, it wasn't useful. It didn't give me any information. And, you know, she was battling a little bit. And I said, okay. I said, how often do you speak to yourself like that? And she went, no. Well, I don't speak to myself like that. And I went, great. We're going to come back in 2 weeks and you're going to do it again. And she's like, oh God. But I said to her, understand that you're being calibrated right now. They aren't going to, usually in the first week or two, tell you information about the moon landing, or because you have to get used to the frequency. And the first thing they get you used to is loving yourself and seeing yourself through the eyes of love. It doesn't mean there aren't things that we grow through. You know, there's things that can happen in my life today and I'll be like, oh, I could have done that better. Next time I'll do that better. But I'm not kicking myself. I'm not like, oh my God, you know, like I would probably have been in my 20s. I'm recognizing, no, I can improve that. I can do better. I can bring a different consciousness to it next time. But in her case, she was a very type A oriented achievement personality and had done brilliant things in the world. But for her, when she came back 2 weeks later, she was a completely different person. She was like, wow, I burst into tears one day after doing it, but it took her like 10 times to burst into tears. And then she started to really use it. So it wasn't just affirming her and giving her loving words. It would start to give her guidance. If she was in a conflict at work, she would write, what do I need to learn about this? And they would give her a perspective about what was going on that would change her view. So the thing about channeling is it's a little bit like having a hot potato. You know, I always say to people with a hot potato, you know, that I don't know if that metaphor stands in Sweden, but it's like, oh, I can't hold this. It's too hot. I want to throw it. I always tell the people in my workshops, I said, who had a bad experience doing this channeling? And nobody puts their hand up in 300 people. Like, I remember once a woman going, I didn't get anything. I had a nice experience. And I went, well, that's okay. I said, practice it and don't panic that you're not getting words, but just, again, put the timer on for 4 minutes, because we get very worried about how long we have to do things, you know. Put the timer on for 4 minutes and just give yourself that space and see if words come. Just keep doing it. And at a certain point, see if words come. But if you're feeling more peaceful, trust that you're tuning into something. You're tuning into your soul, even if you aren't having words. But people have profound experiences when they do it, and it changes their frequency in their life. So that's really the message I have to give, that you will probably resist doing it regularly. And that's what I tell people at workshops. I go, you've had a nice time. I played some nice music. I made you do it. I said, so, you know, you're going to leave here and you're probably going to remember that as a really good moment in the day, but you're less likely to do it. I said, so I challenge you to challenge yourself to do it, and to just every now and then try it, because there's never a time still when I don't channel for myself, when I don't feel better or reset. But I'm human and I will forget, you know, and I do this for a living. You know, I will catch myself and go, oh, you're feeling a bit stressed. You should probably sit down and channel. And I'm like, oh yeah. And then I sit down and I do it. And so I think there is something for all of us about connecting with the voice of our soul or our higher self. Everybody can do that. And if you start with that, that's either usually enough, or it might be that it goes beyond and you have more connection with actual guides, if that's important to you. But I would say for most people, your soul or your higher self is plenty.
Plenty, yeah. And the fun thing, what you're actually saying here is we could use channeling as a part of our personal development, and not just to be someone like you and have a big audience and do that kind of stuff. It's for ourselves. It's kind of a bouncing wall where you can, yeah.
Definitely. And
get good answers.
Yeah, and even for me, I do it for work now, for people, and that's something I've done now for 17 years. Yeah, 17 years. Wow, God. But I also have my own personal relationship with it, and that is private and personal, and it should be. So I think it's true that it enhances our personal development. But what you just said, I really like, because I've always said to people, channeling is best used as part of a balanced diet. In much the same way that if your only spiritual thing is channeling and you overdo it, I've met people who have got a bit lost with it, or they're like, oh my God, my guide told me I need to do this. And I'm like, well, what did they tell you? And they go, I need to take out all my savings and move to Brazil and divorce my husband. And I'm like, okay, how do you feel about all of that? And they've lost their connection to their own feeling, because they're following that. They're still in, understandably, we all have it, I went through it, that idea that spirit is superior to human. And my argument is that is not the case. We are also spirit. We're just having a very human experience of spirit. So actually it's a relationship, and it's a partnership. And if you channel for yourself as part of your self-care routine, it can be incredibly expanding. But equally, I've met people who get a little addicted to channeling, as any of us can with anything. And that I don't recommend. I think it's important to take it in much the same way I would not recommend to anybody in life that they only have one person in life that they trust, because you're only going to get one viewpoint. And so we have a group of friends around us for a reason. We have a group of people around us for a reason. We need the multiple. So channeling can be a really important part of your spiritual life, your personal development.
What would you say then? I mean, with sitting down for 4 or 5 minutes and just listening to what comes through, I like that idea. It's a great quick fix, so to say, just to give to our viewers and say, okay, so just do this and see what happens. Dedicate yourself to it. But what would you say, how can we feel that we actually do have some kind of connection? Should we feel that, or should we just, what could we expect?
Well, a couple of different things. So channeling puts a certain frequency through your body. And what I mean by that is, let me explain it from my terms, maybe. If I have channeled for, say, 45 minutes for a group, and I do that every month, online, I do it in recordings, various things, my energy field is different afterwards. My body will usually be a little hotter. So there are physical experiences when you connect with your guides or your channeling that you should pay attention to. So for example, if you just started channeling and you were to tell me, wow, Lee, I've been channeling for 4 weeks. I do it every other day for 5 minutes. Pay attention to A, how it is enhancing your life, and B, has it increased your sensitivity? Are you a bit more irritable with certain people? And are you a bit less likely to want to go out? The reason I say this is usually when you first start doing it in a big way, it has an effect on you. It starts to change you. So I think if you want to check if it's working, I'm a big fan of evidence. So for example, I would ask lots of personal questions about my life and about areas I was struggling with. And every time it helped me. It not only helped me relax about the situation, but it would give me a piece of information that would help me see it or understand it in a different way. And over time, I started to see things that way too. I started to be introduced to that way of seeing things, and it started to get included in my way of life. So the question you talked about, I always say that a great way to start channeling is to literally ask the question, what does my soul want to tell me today? Question mark. And you can write that at the top of a piece of paper. We have it on these pieces of card that we give out. What does my soul want to tell me today? And do that a few times. And I even do that now. Like if I feel like I need to channel, but I don't have a specific question, I'll just leave it open. But equally, you could write something like, Alexandra seemed a little strange today. Is she okay? Because you felt something with your friend Alexandra, but you couldn't quite put your finger on it. And when you said, oh, how are you? She was like, I'm fine. But you could tell there was something going on. So it's interesting when you can use your own higher self, your own higher view to tap into what's going on, because there is this interconnected field of information between all of us. It's why we tend to, even though I think most of us have learned to go via our mind, we feel people more than we necessarily just believe their words. So if you were to have me on this and you go, hi Lee, how are you today? If I were to come on here and go, I'm fine, Alexandra, I'm really happy to be here, thanks. You know, you'd be like, whoa, what's going on with him? Because my energy and my words did not match at all. And we have, I mean, I was, you know, being silly and kind of doing an extreme, but there are subtleties in that all of the time. So for me, how I really progressed with channeling was I would ask questions about things I was intuitively feeling but didn't fully understand. And gradually, as they would give me extra pieces of information, it developed my own intuition. So there's the standard way. What does my soul want to tell me today? And when you're feeling a bit braver, start asking questions about things in your life. But also, if the answer makes you want to ask more questions, ask more questions. What I mean by that is, the thing about channeling is it's a rabbit hole, because it takes you into all of these realms that are just endless. So if I were to write what's going on with Alexandra today, and all that came out in that first question was, she's upset, but it's not to do with you. Okay, good. Well, that's reassured me, because I wasn't sure if I'd upset her. Okay, but she's upset. Oh, I could leave it at that. And then, you know, friend goes, oh, have you seen Alexandra? Yeah, she's upset. Why is she upset? Oh, hang on. Why is she upset? You know what I mean? It's like, do we stop at the first thing, or do we go, oh, that's intrigued me. I want to know, what is she upset about? Now, it might not be able to say to you, well, because her sister's dog just died and she was very, you know, it might not give you all those specific information. It might, some people get that level of information, but it might say she is dealing with grief. She has some grief in her life. Then the next time I see you, rather than taking it so personally or reacting or thinking it's all about, oh, what have I done? It's nothing to do with me. I might have a bit more compassion for you, because I'm like, oh, I know grief. Oh, wow, bless her. And she clearly doesn't feel like she can talk to me about it. So I won't invade her privacy. I won't necessarily start asking her those questions, because we're not that close. We don't know each other yet. But maybe I'll just, you know, make her a cup of tea when she's not expecting me to, or do something for her, because I can not only see she's struggling, I can feel she's struggling. So for me, channeling incredibly enhanced my intuition. It helped me test what I was feeling as a human being, and it allowed me to bring more intuition into my life. And probably the most popular thing I do right now, I guess, it is the energy update videos that I do every month.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't be able to be the energy intuitive I am today if channeling hadn't been my teacher.
That's nice. I like this this dialogue about using channeling as a helpful tool in life, rather than the channeling out for the masses, because that's not attainable for most of us.
No, and by the way, I mean, on the one hand, I get that it clearly it's something I was supposed to do, and there are other people who are supposed to do it. But the one message they have is, you know, we are all needed, and now is our time. They say you are needed, and now is your time. And they're always talking about the importance of being a single parent to one child. And the impact you're having on that one child is no different energetically to say, you know, I'll pick Oprah Winfrey as an example, because she was a very important personal growth teacher to me when I was 16 years old. And she was having these people on this show talking about their feelings. I mean, to me, that was a revelation, and it was what I needed to see. I needed to see what people were feeling, because they weren't telling the truth in life, in society, in my 16-year-old experience. She, you know, has reached what millions and millions and millions, hundreds of millions of people through what she's done. And what they always say is it's no different. And that life journey is not necessarily superior or better to being the single parent. And we all have different roles in life, and we have different skills, and we have different learnings. So there are different learnings in every role that we have, and the learnings are very specific. So yeah, I don't necessarily advocate that everybody needs to be out there doing it. And my hope is that those of us that are out there doing it are just being useful to the people who might need it. Just as for me, when I was, you know, 16 to 24, every self-help book I read, every workshop I took myself to, everything I exposed myself to helped me discover myself, helped me start to be less afraid of myself. And really, that's where the power lies on earth. The more of us that can become more fully ourselves, more fully expressed, and more fully spirit while human, the better the world will be.
Definitely. So about this, you have written Energy Speaks. And that book is about a bunch of topics. Is it 14 different chapters with topics that I wrote to you this morning? I wrote to you this morning that each topic can seem both commonplace, like everyday usual stuff, and provocative at the same time. Do you understand what I mean?
It makes me smile. So can you explain it a little? The provocative part, I think I understand, but I'd love to understand it fully from your perspective.
Well, you know, you talk about, I will read from my script here. So you will talk about personal power. In Swedish, that would be personlig makt. And power is in Swedish maybe a very strong word that has to do with you know, people ruling over others,
yes.
or, you know, that kind of power. I understand the spiritual message here, but I also can be a little bit provoked by, okay, should I embrace my personal power? How would that feel? How would that be? You know, how would that look from outside in? You talk about feminine and masculine. That's also something, you know, on earth right now. Is that okay, or is it, you know, on the edge? So there's a lot of stuff like that. And abundance, God, abundance, and money.
Yeah.
I mean, should we talk about money? Is that okay, really? So, you know, it's provocative, but it's still, you know, commonplace topics for us every day.
Yeah, no, I understand what you mean. And I it's funny, personal power is the first example you gave, because I do think we get very triggered around that word power, because there is power abuse, basically, is where our mind goes, like power over others, disempowering others. And you also talked about, you know, is that okay? It makes me think of the way that we will judge self-love or self-care as selfishness. You know, we're like, well, that's selfish. And it's like, well, actually it isn't. You know, I would hope that, let's say, we'll just use mother as an example, because I think mothers, in my experience, are the hardest working on the planet in so many ways. And I hope that mothers are more aware in this day and age and more supported to look after themselves than they were when I was growing up, for sure. You know, it just was in the culture that the mother just works hard and often doesn't get acknowledged, or people just take it for granted that the mother's going to do all this stuff. And again, I know there are mothers out there who perhaps weren't wired that way, or perhaps you had a mother who wasn't like that, and that can be very wounding in a culture where the mother was supposed to be a certain way. But the reason I bring it up is, if the mother looks after herself and is able to self-care or self-love, she is going to be a more full cup for those that she is serving and looking after. And I think the reason, my perception as to why it's provocative to us, is it starts to work on our conditioned mind. We have very fixed ideas. We've been trained to have fixed ideas. It's nobody's fault. We've all been trained to have very black and white views of things. And in our generation, that's beginning to come apart at the seams. And what they talk about is how we're very multidimensional as souls and potentially as human beings, but we're not living on the earth in a multidimensional connected way at the moment. So the book really is designed to help you open out what your understanding of those topics will be. And it isn't prescriptive. I mean, that's one of the things I've always liked about the channeling. It's very, there aren't rules you're supposed to follow, and there aren't things you're supposed to do. It will touch you in the place it's supposed to touch you, so that you can open more of that topic out in yourself. It's not that it's saying you should be thinking this about money, or you should be thinking this about abundance, but it will gently massage the parts of your mind, your feelings, and your soul that perhaps have been a little asleep, or the view has been a little hidden. And that's the idea. It's designed to help you bring a slightly more soul-based, intuitive view of life into your everyday life. That's really what the book is serving as. I think of it in a way as an activator for your own intuition, which would make sense because it came through me, who has, one of my biggest life journeys has been activating and owning my intuition, coming from a place of being very afraid to do that and perhaps skeptical of doing that.
So what you're saying, I really like that, because as I told you, I read the book, and it how you put the words into what they're saying, what the book actually is what message the book is sending us, is exactly the way that you explain to us. It's very direct still, because as you say, the guides, they don't care about guilt or shame or whatever. They can just put it out there very straight, and they do, but you write it in a very nice way, so everyone, I think, can be touched without feeling that you are, doing like this.
Which is great, because, you never know when you're creating something. And we were very careful with the editing of the book, because the book came through my guides, but we were also very careful to, it's one thing when it's spoken, it's another thing when you're reading something. So we wanted to make sure that the book felt open to the reader. I wouldn't want it any other way. So it's great to hear that from you. And, the book has now been out for 2 years in the English language, and also the audio version. And it's lovely to continue to hear those kinds of things from people. So thank you, and great.
So it's messages from the guides with you as a channel, but still it's about evolving life, everyday topics with the spirit's view on things.
Yeah, and little exercises peppered throughout too, because I'm personally, I enjoy experiential things. So it's partly information, but there are also very easy, simple, guided visualizations, affirmations, things that you can try through your own body to see how it works for you.
Yeah. So we will work on our personal development with your book as our lesson. Like, how do you say? Like, yeah, the book that we use for evolving. So, do you have a purpose in life, you think? I mean, with the experience you had with everything from growing up to the Z guides and everything, do you have a purpose in life?
You know, it's funny. I feel like my purpose has changed. I think up until a couple of years ago, my purpose was very much around self-healing and personal growth, while also serving that of others. And the two went hand in hand. You know, the more I started to work as a healer and as a teacher for people, the more my own accelerated. Of course, you can't immerse yourself in something like that for that many hours of a year and not have it work you too. But I actually feel like in the last year or two, my role is changing, and I feel like I feel a bit more like an ambassador for not just my work, but this work as a whole, the work of personal development, the work of self-growth, and that really is probably what my next kind of decade is going to focus on. I will still do my own work, but I also know that I have a passion for including other people. It's why I started my weekly podcast, where I speak to different kinds of creatives, healers, change makers, every week, who are slightly different in what they're doing and might be slightly different in their viewpoint. But I guess my mission really is helping people create the life they are here to create, and perhaps what they're here to create. So that's really been my life, to try and create a happy life for myself. And I've come a really long way from where I was. But also to enjoy creating in the world. And so for me, that looks like what I do. But for you, that might look slightly different. It might be creating a harmonic atmosphere wherever you go. It might be creating gardens for your town that are incredible and that people come to. We all have different things to do. So I feel like my job now is to continue to be as useful as I can to other people's birthing creativity. And that brings me a lot of joy, I have to say. I kind of love it. And I feel very grateful to have, if I died tomorrow, I'm a very fulfilled creator when I die. And I was a very frustrated creator 20 years ago because I had creative energy in me, but I didn't know how or where to put it or where it was welcome. So I feel like I've hit my personal fulfillment. And now it's time to kind of, now my personal fulfillment comes from seeing that multiply in the world.
That's a fantastic achievement, though.
It's surprising. I've been reflecting on it a lot lately, and I've felt very grateful. Like, I think of all the dark periods of my life, where I felt very depressed or trapped. And I'm still human, so who knows what's coming up that might be really tough to deal with in life, because life does that. It gives you a high, and then it gives you a low, and then it gives you a challenge, and those things don't change, but we can develop our relationship to those things. That's what I've learned, and I'm grateful to be able to not only say that, but also to have lived long enough at this point to have had the time to do it. So yeah, I feel grateful to have had that experience, and now I would like to see how much I can generate that experience in the world for others.
The funny thing is, when reading your book, we understand that you have a creative past. I mean, not that you're not creative today, because you are very much a creator of your own life and other lives as well. So you played the theater, you are a musician. What else can you add to the creative self of yours?
Well, one of the things I love to do, although I haven't done it much for like a year, is I love to paint. And I didn't start painting until 2010. And it was a big life shift that kind of made that happen for me. So And I would say that I didn't have any training in business, but I realized about 5-6 years ago that business is creative, and that if you do it well, it can be a very creative and energetically alive experience for you and for the people that you're working with and serving. It doesn't have to be this dead gray corporate thing. So I've I spent some time over the last 6 years really trying to better understand how to build both a company that has its heart in the right place, and that is serving the company itself, but is also serving the customers and who we work for. So I would say that has actually been a big area of creative growth for me the last 4 or 5 years, especially because it was kind of scary. I was like, oh my God, I don't know how to, I wanted to run a production company, but I never went to school for this. And how do you do it? And, I don't know. So yeah, and then music has really come back in the last 2-3 years. I kind of put it on the side for a long time. But interestingly, music started to come into the workshops and certain recordings. So myself and Davor Bozik, who is my brother, soul brother, and best friend, and we make music together. So we make music for our community now. We've just started releasing albums, and that's been really fulfilling. So I feel very creatively fulfilled.
So many years ago, you were afraid to go into the spiritual field 100%, if I'm correct, because you were afraid of losing that creativity. And now we can just look back and see that you have brought everything with you on the journey.
Yeah, it's so funny because I feel like it took many years for me to come full circle. So even with, one of the reasons I loved acting was it was shamanic. You shapeshift. I was the kind of actor as a kid who, the furthest away from me the person was, I wanted to play them. Like, give me the old man, give me the, and I would turn into that. So I totally, but it would be like a possession experience, so in a way it was channeling a character. And so it's been interesting, like over the last 5-6 years, it kind of happened organically. But, when you have a workshop room and you're working with people for a full day, or in some cases a full week, I started to learn to bring humor and animation in a bigger way, because I thought, well, that helps us learn. And it's, I love laughing. And so if I can create laughter, great. It's good for all of us to laugh. So I started to, in a way, come full circle and start bringing back, not really in a overly thought out way. It just started happening that all the things that I'd done started to come back in. And I really believe that about all of us. I do think some people have very different lives at different stages of their life, and it's right for them to let go of certain things. I have friends who had really careers they loved in fields that they now have no interest in going back to because they did it. But I also believe that too many of us, and I see this all the time, have gifts inside us that we have forgotten about, or that we have put away, or that we haven't had the opportunity or the support to bring back into our life. And so they become these kind of quiet voices inside us that we often aren't even aware are suffering. But when we can find a way to bring those natural things back, and often if you go back to your childhood and think about, well, what did I love to do? And what might that look like now? Maybe it doesn't look exactly like it does in childhood, but I can see that energy, the thing I loved about it, there's a way I can recreate it over here. And that's a kind of good way to look at your life. And if you think of 8 things, pick the one thing that feels achievable and work on that this next month or 2 and see how you can bring it back into your life.
That's a good advice. Thank you. So what we always ask our authors, what is your motto in life? Do you have a life motto?
Oh, do I have a life motto? It's funny. I have a company motto. I have a motto for my company. Well, I have 2 big mottos for my company, and I just pulled on this motto the other day. There are two mottos in my company. Number one, talent is everywhere, attitude is gold. And that is because I have seen and worked with some very badly behaved, talented people. Yeah. And I have always loved working with people who have a great attitude. So what I recognized in my company was I wanted to make sure that talent did not ever become an excuse for bad behavior or a bad attitude toward people. If you can't be kind and loving most of the time, we're all human. So we'll all have a day where we're stressed, or we'll all have a day where but do you then catch what you did and go, oh, I'm sorry? Or do you not care because you're too talented or too important? And I've seen that many times in the entertainment industry. I've seen it in the spiritual industry, field. And so that was really important to me. But the motto I just pulled on is, if we can't make the deadline, we move the deadline. Mm-hmm. Because I didn't ever want anyone in my company or myself to feel stressed about what we're doing. I wanted all of us to detrain ourselves around this idea that the thing that you're working on is bigger than you and more important than you, and you can just put yourself under a lot of stress in order to make that thing happen. I wanted us to change that paradigm. So I just used that the other day when I realized the big course we were going to do at the end of May was stressing me out because we have enough going on. And so I've pushed it back to September. I used my own advice and I now feel a lot better. But the life motto I would say is, we could die any day. And it may sound morbid, but for me, it keeps me really, really awake. If I remember that I don't know when I'm going to die, I could die in an hour, I could die in 24 hours, I could die in another 50 years. I don't really know. But if I remember that as a truth, and I don't get the amnesia that we often are trained into, which is, oh, well, I'm going to do this in 6 months. It helps me live in a more awake and present way than perhaps I used to, when I would take things for granted and take life for granted. And these guys say that all the time. They say it's very easy to die. So if you're still alive on planet Earth, get curious about why. Because taking you off the planet, taking you out of your body can happen like that. And it's not hard. And we're say
very much aware of that right now, aren't we?
Very much, very much. And interestingly, before COVID, I remember having a few experiences that were very close to the deaths of people. And but I think that level of awareness is important.
I agree with you. God, are we coming out of this period anytime soon, hopefully?
Yeah, I hope so too. I think it's gone on a lot longer than all of us anticipated. And like anything, I think there have been positives and negatives within the whole scenario, the whole situation. And I feel like what it's done to us as a world and what it's doing to us as a world, I feel like we still have another 6 to 12 months really to kind of get a better perspective on that. And I feel like people are less in shock now, which is good, because I think people are starting to look at it and make assessments about it in a different way. At least that's what I'm hearing from people around me. And I think it takes that cultural, that collective sharing of opinion. And I don't mean arguing, because that's happening a lot right now. And that's part of our time, that level of emotion and that level of people being triggered and black and white thinking. But my hope is that, certainly as we get closer to Christmas this year or the winter, that a shift starts to happen. And that's my sense of it right now, that there will be a shift in the world around not just what has been happening, but the way it has been dealt with. Yeah. And the way it's been dealt with, I will say.
And it's been dealt with very differently in your world from my world. From Sweden to the US to wherever you are in the world.
Yeah, and I think that's been an interesting. It's funny. I don't know if it's easy to look at COVID the whole experience of it as a unifier, because I think in many ways it's separated people and it's brought a lot of pain or anguish or mental health challenges or all kinds of things. But it's the first time in my lifetime that I remember us dealing with something as a whole world. And if you take away COVID for a second and you just look at that, it's very interesting, because it shows you exactly as you said how a different country is dealing with different things, and it's revealing of the psychology, it's revealing of the culture, it's revealing of the conditioning. So in that sense, it's interesting to be able to see that.
Yeah, definitely. So what about the Z guys? The guys, I'm sorry, the guides. Are they here right now? Do they want to say anything to their Swedish audience? Do you want to say anything?
Well, they just say we're excited. We're excited to be here. We're excited to be a part of this conversation. And those people who are going to receive the book are receiving the book to remember. That's a good point. That's a good point. I was thinking that as I was driving here this morning. For me, anybody who brings themselves to channeling or to any work like this, they're doing it to remember the part of themselves that connects to it already. So I see this a lot with people who like channeling. They're usually able to channel, maybe not in the way I do, maybe it's a little different, but they're not necessarily just coming to see someone like me do a party trick of channeling. They're coming to it because some part of them remembers it as truth and wants to re-ingrain it. So yeah, they're very excited. They're happy the book is coming out. And I'm very happy that it's coming out in Sweden. And thank you to you and everybody who is behind that. And I should also say to my publisher, New World Library, who are fantastic.
I am in contact with Daniel Gallat there.
Yes.
And she's nice. She's so good to be in contact with. And she helps out whenever we need.
That's fantastic. They're such a lovely company. They have a family energy, which is why I was so happy to end up with them with the book, because they come from a wonderful place there.
Yeah. Like your company, hopefully.
Yeah, no, that's
you want to put in it.
That's one of the things I'm really proud of, and not to take credit for it, but more that just, I'm grateful that I've managed to assemble a beautiful group of people who are all very talented and very different in their own right. And interestingly, one of the things I'm doing right now is really looking at my company, and actually delaying that course has given me time to kind of take care of the inner house for this next month and kind of look at what we might need for the next year and what everybody might need. So
I'm so happy to have been able to meet you like this, because once I saw your face on an image, I felt for your eyes, and I just figured, this guy is so kind. He's so humble. I just felt that. And now I've been able to talk to you, and I can feel that. And it's so nice. I love it.
Thank you. And it's a funny thing, isn't it? Because one of the strangest things I feel about being told that you're humble is I always think, well, shouldn't we all be? You know what I mean? But I think because it's not, I don't think there's any suffering in recognizing our equality. Quite the opposite. I think there's a lot of suffering in people who are power tripping or trying to have power. There are deep wounds that make you want to have power over other people. And they may be wounds you're completely unaware of. And, without naming names, we've certainly seen some of those on the global stage recently. But yeah, I always find it so interesting. So well, thank you. And it's been lovely to be with you and to have this moment of connection to Sweden, which I must get back to. It's been 15 years since I was there.
It's time to come back.
Yeah. Oh, I tell a lie. Actually, I was there for a music concert in 2011. Where did we go? It was this beautiful place. It was an island. I'm gonna have to try and remember. No, I'll have to get back to you on that. But it was we were just there for a day. It was lovely.
So let me just double check. So there's nothing very important for us to go through. We've talked a lot about the Z guys and about you. No, I think we covered everything.
Well, thank you. And by the way, one of the things that they will talk about that bring harmony and symmetry to the world is beauty. And they will say that beauty is a very powerful force for us. So it's why things like mandalas or symmetry bring a certain peace to us, a certain presence. So I would like to thank you for the beauty of your screen, because it's very stylish. I love your wall. I love your picture, the way that you're dressed, everything. So thank you for bringing the presence of beauty through your screen as well. It's been lovely to be with you this morning.
Wonderful. Thank you, Lee. I hope that I will meet you again.
That would be great. And take care. And thank you to all who are watching or reading the book.